Howdy folks, Rudros here, and welcome to a gray-purple deck tech for set 5 Shimmering Skies. And the whole point of this deck is to mill out our opponent. Yes, an alternate win condition. No longer must you get to 20 lore. Instead, you're just going to empty their deck of all the cards it has and win that way. Now, I won't lie. I don't know how often that's going to happen. Like, you should still probably try to get lore as a condition, but I thought it would be fun to do this because it is also an alternate condition that if you are struggling to get to 20 lore, it's nice to kind of have a backup condition. So if you aren't familiar with him from set 3, this all revolves around Jafar Striking Illusionist, which can be shifted onto turn 5, and then whenever this character is exerted while you draw a card, you gain 1 lore. So if you aren't aware of the big combo that was available in set 3, you would shift this Jafar onto a smaller Jafar in set 5 and immediately have him sing a whole new world. Not only will you have the normal effect of whole new world, draw 7 cards, but because Jafar sang it, he's now exerted, you also instantly gain 7 lore. So if you're able to pull off the combo pretty consistently and on turn 5, you can stack a bunch of lore out of nowhere. So in addition to this normal combo, we've gotten a few new tools in set 5 that we can use to not only help our Jafar plan so that we can win in the normal way, because that will be more reliable, but in case that doesn't work out, we also have ways to help mill our opponent. So what are some of the new cards we got? Amethyst, Chromacon. So while Jafar is exerted and you use this, not only are you drawing a card, you're going to be gaining lore for it as well. And this is a way to help you mill out your opponent because it says each player may draw a card. Now, if it gets late enough in the game and your opponent realizes you're trying to mill them, they're going to stop drawing cards. But early on, way before you ever get to the Jafar point, they're always going to take advantage of that. They will only stop doing it when they realize, oh my goodness, he's actually going to try to get rid of all the cards in my deck. So it's a good way to help speed your opponent down to 0 cards. As you can see, we have 67 cards in this deck. You do want to run a little more than 60 in a mill game plan because you want to make sure you are not the one who mills out before they do, especially since you have so much card draw. Other way to help get to that is a card that I thought looked worthless during the set review, but is actually very good here. It's the Earth Giant. He has really good stats for a 4 cost. He's a 4 cost, 4 attack, 5 health. So yeah, he'll die to a Zeus, but he is immune to things like Brawl and Medusa, and he quests for 2 lore. But when he enters, to make up for all those stats, is what I guess they were thinking when they designed him, your opponent draws a card. And if you notice here, there's no may. It is a mandatory trigger that they draw a card. As a matter of fact, I'm going to show you a match if you stick around for the matches, where not only do I mill out my opponent, this Earth Giant is what seals the deal for it. So he's a mandatory card draw. Yzma is very good here as well. Normally, the downside of her removal effect, yes, it was unrestricted removal. You know, it didn't have to have a certain willpower or strength or cost. She could remove anything, but then they got to draw 2 cards. But here, if you're trying to mill them out, now that kind of just becomes a plus side for you. It essentially becomes a +1 towards their deck, or maybe it's better to say -1, because you are putting a card back into their deck, and then they're drawing 2, so they essentially will lose 1 card from their deck. But still, it's spot removal you're happy to use when you're trying to mill them out, and you can use it on your own cards if you have a Jafar in play. Yzma can come in and, you know, stick one of your other cards right back into your deck. Now you're going to draw 2. She essentially then reads gain 2 lore on entry, which is pretty cool if the Jafar's out and exerted. Some other fun toys. Where was the... Let's see. Friends on the Other Side, of course. Natural card draw. Helps with Jafar. Second star to the right, I'll be honest, I can't really see this one coming up, and being realistic, you should probably cut this, but I'm just keeping it in for the fun of it. It's uninkable, so if you draw this early, you're kind of just hosed, unless you can fish it out of your hand with a whole new world. But if you notice the effect, chosen player draws 5 cards. So if you have Jafar out, you can have Jafar sing it with somebody else, to give it to yourself. So now Jafar says not only draw 5 cards, gain 5 lore. Maybe that wins you the game. Or if you're very close to milling your opponent out, again, this isn't optional. You can force them to draw 5 cards. Again, it's probably not worth the setup that's going to take, but is it in here for fun? Yes, it absolutely is. You can cut it if you so desire. And then to help keep us alive, we have a lot of removal spells, of course. Long Came Zeus, Grab Your Sword, Tinkerbell, you know, Smash, Baboo. If you've been playing Steel for any amount of time, you're aware of what all these are. 1 copy of Avalanche, you could and Rise of the Titans, so you can deal with locations, or if there is a lucky dime, some kind of brutal item, you could absolutely cut these if you feel like you're not going to face those, but There's an in here for that. Now, the other little engine we have going on is the Blue Fairy. The Blue Fairy is the reverse of Bucky. So whenever you play a Floodborn character, you get to draw a card, which helps gets you through all these cards in your deck in the early game, and can of course assist with Jafar in the later game too. So we are running a nice Floodborn package. There's no Mr. Smee in here, as much as I would love to have him in here. We just don't have the space unless you want to go up another 4 cards, go to 71. So we need Floodborns. We need Jafars that we can shift onto this Jafar. This Jafar is a Floodborn, so he will trigger Blue Fairy. Aladdin will trigger Blue Fairy, and this card is still very, very good, especially if you're against an item deck. He's got good stats, and the fact that he can start breaking items is really nice. We also went in on the Robin Hood package, because not only is he a Floodborn, so if you can do Baby Robin Hood 1, Blue Fairy 2, Big Robin Hood on 3, then, and you'll see this in a few games, if you have him out when you can shift into the Big Jafar, you do any of the Jafars on 4, probably this one, and because that way you'll draw from the Blue Fairy. And then Big Jafar on 5, not only is he a Floodborn, he's going to trigger the Blue Fairy. If he can sing a whole new world, and if you draw into another whole new world off of that, Robin Hood can immediately sing a whole new world as well, which means Jafar is now going to gain you 14 lore the turn he comes in. That's pretty freaking crazy. So it's a fun deck. I don't know how strong it would sit overall in the meta. Ever since it came out, Jafar always has potential, because if you see the right lineup and they just don't have the removal, you can just steal wins out of nowhere. But the mill potential is definitely higher than it ever was before, thanks to Earth Giant, Chromacon, etc. So let's see how it performs. Let's get to some matches. All right, match 1. We do have some Blue Fairies in our hands. We do have the Big Jafar. You could opt to keep him if you want to really, really go in on that combo. Usually I will get rid of him, especially if I don't see an alternative Jafar. So there was nothing to shift him onto, and waiting until turn 7 to play him essentially does nothing. The turn he comes in, then you have to wait a whole turn to take advantage of him. So usually I'm not looking for that. Looks like our opponent's on green. It's way too early for a card like Yzma, so you can just put out something like Robin Hood here. We have Robin Hood, we have Blue Fairy. We don't really have anything great to shift on them. They get to check with Ursula, pull out Whole New World, or Friends. They opt for the Whole New World. Decks like this are always going to be a pain facing green, and the Ursula that can rip cards out of your hand is always going to feel quite bad. Now, Blue Fairy is very good here. One thing you have to be a little mindful of is when you have a card like Pegasus in play, that Pegasus could technically trade with the Blue Fairy, so you need to be a little mindful questing. You can also trade with your own Blue Fairy, though, if your opponent doesn't have anything as well. So our opponent checks our hand. Unfortunately for us, we drew the Along Came Zeus, and so opponent is really ripping our hand to shreds right now. However, right on time, we actually draw into the Aladdin, which feels very nice. Not only can Aladdin trade with these Ursulas very well, I do get to draw a replacement card from the Blue Fairy. I'm heavily considering questing. I do. At this point, I say, well, I think my opponent's probably trying to go faster than me. So if they want to take the time to drop this Pegasus into the Blue Fairy, I think I'm okay with that. They end up running both into the Robin Hood, potentially fearing the shift. As you can see, we don't have an amazing hand. I opt to just Zeus the Diablo. I don't want them getting any pressure off of it. Aladdin, I usually start picking off the Ursulas. And again, at this point, I'm very much okay if they want to stop the speed of the Pegasus to slow down the Blue Fairy, they can. Clarabelle Cow lets me know that not only are they probably on the big Clarabelle, but they've got some items. Don't really have anything playable on this turn. If you don't have experience playing against the Clarabelle, she's going to draw cards at the end of your opponent's turn based on how many cards you have in hand. So if you have a low hand size like this, shifting onto the big Clarabelle doesn't actually do anything, because I don't have any cards in hand. Our opponent opts to shift anyway, so this is a fun little trick you can do with it, and I'll probably show a Clarabelle deck here coming up in the near future. They can use your welcome to throw it into my hand. It purposely makes me fill up my hand, and now the Clarabelle can draw off of it, which is very nice for the Clarabelle. Here comes in the Tinkerbell. We clean up the field. Now the Blue Fairy is evasive. It can't be hit by this other Clarabelle. I don't want to overly draw at this point if I can help it, because I don't want them to continually refill up on the Clarabelle. I have to be a little mindful of that. They put out the Diablo. They do another You're Welcome. Tinkerbell being that damage threat. And now they do get to draw off the Clarabelle as well. Now, the one good thing is if we get to our mill plan, then our opponent is also kind of hurtling their way towards that as well. So we put on an Yzma. I just go ahead and get rid of that Clarabelle. Say, all right, that's enough fun of you here. See how you like it when I jam something into your deck. I think they were on 39 cards in deck there. So as you can see, this is not a typical, hey, we're going to use Jafar to try to win the game kind of match. This is we didn't see the Jafar combo, so now we have to grind out another way to get a victory, which is one of the things this deck has quote-unquote struggled with, is that if you don't see the combination or if they have the removal for it, I don't want to say it falls apart, because purple and gray are still a pretty decent color combination, but it gets a lot weaker. If you look at the deck tech, we didn't have room for the Merlin Mim package. You know, that's a lot of cards. We're already at 67 cards, and if you put in a full 4 of those 4 cards, that's 16. So that is what, nearly, that's 80 something cards. We do not want to, that's a bit too much even for me. I suppose if you're brave enough, you could do it, or you could take out other characters, but I like the Floodborn package. You could make an argument that maybe the Merlin Mim is actually better, but I do really like the Floodborn package and the way it kind of supports the Jafar. So that's what we went into. So here I get to, the nice thing is, since I know I'm against green purple, I can go wide pretty safely. I put out the Chromacon. My opponent starts to draw for this as well, right? My opponent has no illusions that I'm going to mill them out currently. They know I'm just kind of trying to play what I can and stabilize, and our opponent puts out their own Jafar. Uh-oh. That's not good. So now I'm thinking, oh, this is a little tricky. This could be dangerous. Our opponent, they don't have the whole new world, but they can still draw if they're able to pull out anything impressive. So we can keep drawing off of the blue fairy here. The Jafar could trade into blue fairy, but I'm very much okay with that. Like, yeah, go ahead. If you want to waste your time doing the blue fairy, you can do that. I feel pretty good about my card draw with the Chromacon, so I'm happy to ink friends and just see what they can pull out. I was definitely surprised when the Jafar came down. I was like, wait a minute. That's what I'm supposed to be doing. You don't get to do that to me. They do bring down a big Ursula. Luckily, we have both a Tinkerbell and a Baboom in hand, so the steel removal continues to be very prevalent against cards like this, as you're able to just take them down about as quickly as you can. I am noticing my opponent's deck is getting a little low, so I am starting to think, well, if I can't quite get to 20 this turn, maybe I'll have to mill them out. And I apologize, I was having some technical issues. Tabletop Simulator was freaking out during this, so if it cuts to black like that really quickly, I apologize, but that was out of my control. Now our opponent is just using all their card draw, using cards like Strike a Good Match to get easy lore off of this Jafar. So this Jafar, you know, they're on lethal on board. Essentially, technically they're -1, but if they have any kind of card draw, the Jafar's going to get them there. I have Whole New World in hand. I'm checking the Jafar, checking the board. You know, I have to find a way to get rid of this. They don't have anything exerted for my Tinkerbell. I draw a new one and thinking, well, all right, what do we do? How on earth do we possibly get out of this? And I think at this point, I'm starting to think, you know, I may have to just mill them, because I have no guaranteed way to get rid of. Yeah, they have 15 cards left in deck. And so I'm thinking, well, if we sing Whole New World, that's going to force them down to 8 cards left in deck, right? Okay, if we can get another Whole New World, that would, oh, and look what we just drew, another Whole New World. And so now I'm thinking, okay, yeah, plan, mill them, end this game right now. I don't have enough on board to quest. Tinkerbell sings the Whole New World. Here comes the next one. Our opponent has a single card left in their deck, and guess what we use? The Earth Giant. It's mandatory. Unlike the Chromacon, they're forced to draw it, and we just milled out our opponent. And our opponent chose, I had a second star to the right. I could have won. I absolutely could have won on our turn, but we milled them out. We didn't give them that chance. Woohoo! Game 2, Tabletop Simulator is a bit annoying, as I always have to zoom way out to see my hand very well, at least for the mulligan and the way you have to resolve it. Anyway, so we do have the Robin Hood plan. We actually have a really good plan here. We have a Robin Hood, Shift Robin Hood, Jafar, Shift Jafar, and Whole New World. So if something doesn't go untoward, we are ready to combo off as long as we can get there and we don't just like brick on uninkables. So I'm feeling very safe to quest with the Robin Hood. I'm assuming this is some kind of blue-red or blue-steel deck. And they put out the Chicha. So our opponent's going kind of slow. I opt to ink one of the Jafars. We go ahead and shift into the big Robin Hood. He's going to be safe for any kind of removal our opponent could want to throw at him this early. So we'll just start questing away, trying to get as much of a lore advantage as we can. There's a Fishbone Quill, so our opponent wants to ramp up. They're going to get to draw off their Chicha. So yeah, this is blue-gray. But this deck wants a minute to ramp up. I'm not going to give them that chance. There's no blue fairy, but I am set up for the Jafar Shift Whole New World combo, Can they pull something out on 5 ink like a Zeus? No, they got a Donald, so they're ramping up. Well, they can have all the ink in the world. That's not going to matter if I can pull this game out of nowhere. So check this out. Turn 5, your hand's going to go away, so ink whatever you don't need. Shift Jafar, sing A Whole New World. Can we get ourselves into another one? And we get 7 lore off the Jafar. Boom! We go to 12 lore. Our opponent has to discard their whole hand as well. Unfortunately, we didn't draw a second Whole New World to sing it with Robin Hood, which would have put us to 19. But we quest, we're on 14, and our opponent's kind of scared now. It's like, well, if he draws another Whole New World, this game just ends because that... So he has to either answer this Jafar... He has to find something to do, and yeah, he had to think, man, well, what do I do? What do I do? Like, do you even have it? Obviously, if I'd had it right there, I would have just sang it with the Robin Hood, so they're trying to think, well, what can I do? So he does the Tinkerbell, but since Robin Hood is so beefy and Jafar's evasive, he's not going to be able to attack into anything. He can support with Chicha, but that's about it. I have the Amethyst in my hand, so yeah, it looks like our opponent did use the support with the Donald to take out the Robin Hood. But guess what we just drew into? A whole new world. Boom. Game's over. Easy peasy. Oh, the combo's so fun when it goes off. Game 3, we have a lot of mountain giants. I just show that to my opponent. It's been like, hey, look at what it really wants me to play. There's nothing great here. You could maybe keep the argument of the Aladdin just because it's a 3 cost. The only thing I opt to keep is the Chromacon. Yeah, in some decks, I do get a little hesitant to use the Chromacon because you need to be mindful of giving your opponent cards, especially depending on what type of deck it is. If it's a late-game control deck, you do not want to necessarily feed them a bunch of cards. But in other decks, it's okay. In this one, I feel a lot better about it because knowing I have that backup mill plan that, okay, even if they get a ton of cards, I can potentially mill them out, so I don't need to worry about it. So we have the Robin Hood shift. I always put that out if I've got the opportunity to use it. You could, I noticed there was only 3 of each one in the deck. You could go up to a full 4 if you want. It'd put you up to 69 slots. You could maybe cut a few other things. There's nothing that says you have to keep it 67. You just want to have a few more than 60 so that you don't mill out first if that comes up. And yeah, at this point, I just want the power of the card draw. So put out the Chromacon, say go ahead and draw as much as you want. I'm trying to rush towards my game plan. You can do whatever you want. And opponent is ramping, so they're happy to... say, yeah, please give me as many cards as you can. It is blue steel as well. A little early for the Tinkerbell. But we can shift Robin Hood and start putting on that questing pressure. I go for another draw from the Chromacon. And we do have the Jafar combo in hand as well. Now, we don't have Whole New World, but we're ready to at least put on that Jafar combo pressure. It's a little scary given a ramp deck as many cards as we have, but in the late game, the only way I'm really going to beat them is through... the mill effect, right? Like, card for card, pound for pound, they probably have better cards than I do. But you do have ways to deal with Tamatoa. It's not as hopeless as some other decks can feel against a card as big as Tamatoa, because you do have Yzma. Yzma is just outright spot removal. You don't have to rely on a bunch of steel effects. We put out the Jafar. We are ready to shift. Our opponent has to be mindful of that. It's like, he could shift. They should know. But look, our opponent already has Tamatoa out with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 items. That's a big crab. That is a big shiny crab who now going to quest for 7. And I kind of see that too. It's like, well, do I have a way to... And I think I do have a way to deal with this Tamatoa. See, the problem is shifting Jafar here doesn't do a whole lot because I don't have the Whole New World to sing. I do draw into it off of the Chromacon. However, I'm going to try to deal with this Tamatoa. So what I do is I sing grab your swords for 2 damage, ba-boom for 2 damage, and then have the snake sing Along Came Zeus for 5 damage. So I deal 9 damage to that Tamatoa. And I still have enough to do a Jafar next turn. And I just go ahead and get rid of 1 quill with the Rise of the Titans. That doesn't really do anything when they have this many items and they still have a quill. But I know my hand's going to get wheeled away next turn anyway. So it's like, let's just go for it. And our opponent uses Let It Go. So actually both of our Robin Hoods get jammed into the Inkwell, which buffs our ink up, which we're quite all right with. And 1 on our Jafar Dreadnought. But that's okay, because we are ready to do the thing. So we're going to shift. Take a little moment on Tabletop Simulator and sing A Whole New World. Gain 7 lore. That's 12. What can we draw into? So we can use our Chromacon here. Go to 13 lore. I could put out a second Chromacon, which is likely what I'm going to do. Yep, another 14 lore. and just a Robin Hood. I actually had a third Chromacon in hand if I could get it. What am I presenting on board? And I just show him. I think my opponent asked, hey, show me Whole New World because I don't have a way to get rid of Jafar. And I was like, yep, I just drew Whole New World. So we got that one as well. Felt pretty darn good. All right, we've got a hook opening. That's not bad. We have both Robin Hoods. You're always happy to see that. So we definitely want to keep those. As a matter of fact, I'm willing to give up the hook knowing I have the Robin Hoods. No sign of any kind of Jafar play, but we'll go into Robin Hood. You could sing a Whole New World as early as turn 3 with Robin Hood if you really wanted to. There are sometimes I think that's the correct thing to do, especially if it looks like our opponent might be doing some aggro plans. But we've got decent attackers. And if we can get big Robin Hood out, not only can we sing Grab Your Swords, he's really good to trade into aggro decks. He keeps you up on the lore. He keeps you competitive there. And when he finally gets banished, he's likely going to draw you a card too. Now, our opponent, potentially sensing this, opts to put the snake in. I go for the quest. I could quest with the Jafar. I opt to. I don't have the shift, and the snake will die to the Jafar. It's one of the reasons I like that Jafar card, since he hits for 3. Even if he were to like quest bounce into the Fox, Fox can't kill Robin Hood. It will still die to the Jafar. Our opponent gets to go wide here, but that's where this Grab Your Sword is going to be really huge. Big Robin Hood, man. This card is just so punishing to these aggressive decks, especially when you have a card like Grab Your Sword, which I sing, take all of those out. And I just use Baboom to finish off the snake. I could have challenged the snake with Robin Hood and then just gotten the lore from it anyway. Well, no, I couldn't because I had to sing, so never mind. Ignore me. And I wanted to keep as many people on board as possible. Well, guess what we just drew into? Jafar, Whole New World, sing. That's 7 lore. Don't mind if I do. Didn't draw into the second one for Robin Hood, unfortunately, as we could have gone all the way to 19. Gosh, man, that's so much lore. That's so much lore. But still, quest, we're on 14. We can be on lethal for all our opponent knows. Our opponent is a hyper aggro deck. We have 5 ink, and I'm on 14 lore, and they're on 7. Think about that. It's very different. We'll just say that. So we can do Tinkerbell here to put 1, which is what I'm probably thinking. Okay, so first I'm going to have Jafar sing Grab Your Sword. Then the Blue Fairy. Then, yeah, I could have... Tinkerbell still wouldn't have finished off Daisy. And I'm on 17 lore and saying, all right, I hope you can wipe my board and hyper aggro. I don't think so. That's not going to happen. My goodness. Shift Robin Hood. Very, very powerful. And that is the deck. Man, I really had fun with this one. This is a deck I've always enjoyed, and I just think it's really fun in this set with cards like the new Earth Giant, and the Chromacon is so nice as well. Again, a couple little adjustments. You could probably get rid of Second Star to the right. I feel like that wouldn't come up super often, but it's there if you want it. You could replace Avalanche with something else. Same with Rise of the Titans if you don't anticipate fighting a lot of items or locations. But yeah, this deck is really fun if you want something kind of different. I think it's a really good deck to play with. Yeah, I've really enjoyed doing it. Let me know what you think in the comments. I appreciate you watching. I always love reading your feedback, and I look forward to probably a Clarabelle green-blue deck coming out in the very near future. So thanks so much for watching, following the channel. Please like and subscribe. It really helps. It makes a big, big difference. Hope you're enjoying your Set 5 of Lorcana, and until next time, take care. Good luck milling your opponents.